Welcome to a very special concert, What is Jazz? My name is Mitch GLICKMAN, music director of a very unique group called the Symphonic Jazz Orchestra. Normally, we are a 68-member ensemble filled with string players, brass players, percussion players, and woodwind players. But today, we're going to be safe and healthy, so we just brought a few key members of the orchestra with us. Our program is being recorded at a very special jazz club. It's called the World Stage in Leimert Park. I hope you get a chance to check out some of their great concerts and programs. So here we go, off on a little jazz adventure that will try to answer the question, what is jazz? Jazz is one of America's greatest inventions, and it originated in the black community over 100 years ago. Now, to really understand about jazz, you need to understand the three main ingredients that go into this magical jazz recipe. First and foremost is a style of music called the blues. Now, the blues began in the South, out of the African American community in the late 1800s. The blues is a style of music that grew out of hymns and spirituals. Now, the blues is also a feeling, and it's something that doesn't quite go right, you got the blues. And believe me, we all get the blues. But here's the secret. You got to share your blues. You got to share your tough times because it's going to help you. It's going to make you feel better, and it lets people help you out. Now, the blues started with a very important instrument, your voice. Your voice is the most powerful instrument in the world, and we all have one. And the voice can do a lot of very special things, like bending the notes, kind of like this. Do, me, do. You try it. Do, me, do. Nice. So you can hear the notes stretch and bend. That's one of the qualities of the blues. One of the greatest blues musicians who ever lived was a woman named Bessie Smith. Now, Bessie Smith had this big, powerful voice, and she composed so many great blues songs. Our bass player, Miss NEDRA Wheeler, is going to sing one of those great songs. It's called Backwater Blues. See if you can figure out what this song is about.
When it rained for days and the sky turned dark at night. Oh, when it rains 5 days and the sky's turning dark at night. There's trouble taking place in the lowlands at night. I woke up this morning, can't even get out my door. I woke up this morning, can't even get out my door. There's enough trouble, baby, to make a poor girl wanna know where she wants to go.
That was Ms. Nedra Wheeler on bass and vocals. Ms. Wheeler, how did you get started in music?
My father was a singer-songwriter. My grandfather was a bass player at church. And my mom loves the arts. I know that connection was really powerful. So I experienced many rehearsals in our home. Went to school and finished my master's at California Institute of the Arts. Did quite a bit of traveling after college. Well, not right after college, but I traveled with some really great renowned artists like Al Tudi Heath, Karen Briggs, Milch Oliviev. We went to Bulgaria, and then from there I went on my own little travels to Italy and France, and stayed in Europe and met other great jazz musicians in Denmark, or in Holland. So, but on the way back and coming back home, I became a music teacher, and I enjoy empowering our students.
The next ingredient in this special jazz recipe is a style of music called ragtime. And just to be clear, ragtime has nothing to do with cleaning. See, ragtime was the music that went with this new dance called rags. So if you're going to have a dance party, what are we going to do? You're going to go play some tunes on your record player? You're going to sync up your phone? Download some Spotify tunes? None of that was invented. You needed musicians to play music for your dance party. And the piano was a really popular instrument at the time. So the ragtime music mostly featured the piano. We're going to hear a very popular song by Scott Joplin. It's called The Entertainer. It was composed in 1902. I have a feeling you may have heard this one before. And that was The Entertainer by Scott Joplin, performed by our piano player, Mr. Christian Jacob. So, Mr. Jacob, what was your beginning in music like?
I started very young. I was born in France, and we had a piano in the apartment, an upright, and when I was about 3, I was tapping on the keys and all this, and my mother suddenly recognized that I was trying to play a melody of the time of a pop song was on the radio. So she got excited and gave me some piano lesson right away when I was 4. And so I had really lessons very often. I became like a, a classical player, but then I always liked jazz, and so I always did the little jazz on the side and taught myself improvising and things like that. And then I got excited, and then decided to come to America to do more jazz with Gary Burton. I played with in the big band of Maynard Ferguson for years. With Bill Holman, big band too. And then I did a lot of arranging and composing. Also, I wrote for some movies, and then I arranged for some people.
The final ingredient in our jazz recipe was a group called the Brass Bands. And these bands were very popular in the city where jazz was born, New Orleans, Louisiana, which is right next to Mississippi, where the blues were born. Now, in New Orleans, they called this city a melting pot. Now, a real melting pot, an actual melting pot, and you've seen these in books and stories before, it's a big, large, dark kettle, and you just throw whatever food you had into this kettle. Some meat, some vegetables, if you were lucky, some spices, and the flavors would sit over the open fire and melt together. Now, the expression melting pot is when people come together and melt together, share their ideas and their cultures and their food and their music. New Orleans was this great melting pot, even before there was a country of America. And in this one magical city, all these different people came together from France, from Spain, from the nearby islands, from South America, from Mexico. And they brought all their ideas, their cultures, their sounds, their food to this one very special city. And over time, these ideas melted together. Now, the brass bands that were popular in New Orleans were a collection of brass instruments, trumpets and trombones and tubas. We don't quite have all the correct instruments for the brass band, but we have a lot of them. So we're going to put together a song right now. You might have heard this one, When the Saints Go Marching In. Sing along if you know it. Take it away, Mr. Cameron. So let me introduce the rest of the band. We have on trumpet, Mr. James Ford. On trombone, Mr. Francisco Torres. Our drummer is Mr. Clayton Cameron. On saxophone, Miss Ann Patterson. And on violin, Mr. Chris Woods. Mr. Cameron, how old were you when you got started in music?
Boy, I started banging on oatmeal boxes when I was about 6 years of age. And then finally I got a pair of bongos from a neighbor, just off the cuff. a photographer getting rid of his props, and I started playing those every single day. And so up until the age of 12 years of age, I had my instruments were the bongos and oatmeal boxes. And so finally another neighbor, I had some good neighbors in those days. He was a former musician, still played, and he told my dad, he said, "I think your son has some talent. You should, get him a drum set." So one day there was a drum set. At the age of 12, there was a drum set that showed up in my living room, and the rest is history. Because after that, I would start playing with a big band when I was 16 with the Grants Music Center rehearsal band. And so with all that kind of big band experience, I would end up playing with Joe Williams. And then from Joe Williams, I played with the Sammy Davis Jr. Orchestra. And because of Sammy Davis Jr., I played with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, did those whole things. And then I ended up being the drummer for Tony Bennett for about 13 years.
Mr. Ford, how did you get started in music?
I got started in my 5th grade band in the public school system in South Georgia. They were asking students, whoever was interested in playing in the band, to sign up, and I asked my parents, and they got me a trumpet along with my cousin who played trombone. And the other thing that's very interesting about playing the trumpet is that, I get to play all kinds of styles. I get to play some jazz, get to play some classical, get to play some pop, sometimes some rock, and sometimes some funk. But it all started with that desire, hearing that music in the public schools in Georgia.
Mr. Torres, what was your start in music like?
I was actually pretty old. I was 14 years old. It was one of my electives in band in high school. I actually played alto saxophone first, and then I played, of all things, tuba, and then I played euphonium, and then I ended up in trombone. Self-taught, I actually just asked to borrow a trombone at the school, and they let me take it over Christmas vacation. I bought myself a position book, and I figured it out. But since I was already playing euphonium, that's kind of how it ended. And I wasn't even thinking about doing it as a career. I was a computer science major, but I was also playing in the college bands. And the more and more and more that I was doing it, I said, maybe I should switch majors. So I switched majors, and then I'm actually a college dropout, which is not a good thing, but to go on the road, just like the ladies and gentlemen here play with a lot of great bands. So I was on the road at 22 with Poncho Sanchez, and I've been there 23 years now. Jeez. And I've been the musical director the last 13. I played with several bands, Gordon Goodwin, with John Beasley. That's how I started, just sheer will to get here today.
So it was in this amazing city of New Orleans that all these sounds started to melt together. The blues that came from Mississippi, the ragtime syncopation that came from the Midwest, and the brass bands that came from New Orleans. Over time, they got together and created a new sound called jazz. And then jazz started to become very popular. And as they got popular, they got larger and larger, and soon we had big bands. And these bands enveloped this new sound, this new beat called swing. Now, swing is a rhythm. It's not quite even. It's long, short, long, short, long, short, long. Kind of swings along. It's the sound that we started our concert with, the swing beat, a really important beat in the world of jazz. One of the greatest big band leaders of all time was a composer and piano player named Duke Ellington. Now, Duke Ellington wrote a lot of great songs that I hope you get a chance to explore later on. The song that opened our concert today was called Missin' Duke, and it's our tribute to Duke Ellington. We're going to do that song one more time so you can really focus in on that swing rhythm. And also, this time, we're going to open it up a little bit so you can hear some soloists do some great improvisation. there are two more musicians that I'd like to introduce to you. First, on saxophone and clarinet, Ms. Ann Patterson. Ms. Patterson, how did you get started in music?
I got the opportunity to play an instrument in the band, in the 6th grade band. I was like so excited, I couldn't wait. I just loved doing music, always. And I wasn't sure which horn I wanted to play. I actually wanted to play the drums for a little bit because my father had played drums. But I was told that wasn't an appropriate instrument for a girl back in the day. So I decided to play the saxophone because we had one at home that my brother had played, and he had moved on to a different instrument. And so I started out playing the saxophone in the 6th grade band. Been a professional musician all my life and also done some college teaching along with that. I've played with so many great people in so many different situations. Pit orchestras for Broadway shows, some studio recording for records and TV and movies. I've played with some of the greatest big bands around, and I love being able to play all kinds of music on all kinds of instruments. I actually started my own big band back in 1980. There weren't that many opportunities for women to play, and so I started an all-female big band back then. And it was a great band. We played a lot of the big jazz festivals and gave a lot of women an opportunity to grow and be heard and move on into other great things.
And then our violinist, Mr. Chris Woods. Mr. Woods, what was your start in music like?
I started when I was 4. My dad would play pieces on the piano, and I had this thing when I was a kid, like every time he got to the end, I had to run in and like sing the last note really loud. So that was my thing back then. I studied it. I studied classical music. I was always fascinated with how to make things up. And once I heard about improvising, I was like, whoa, what's that? And that just like completely opened up my whole world, because I was like, oh, you don't have to just play music by dead people, you know? You can actually make something up in the moment, and it just like completely was like a whole new dimension. I've done all kinds of stuff. I've played for movie sessions, which is fun. Probably the biggest one I've done lately was the remake of The Lion King with Hans Zimmer. I played TV stuff. I used to play on American Idol back when that was big.
So jazz, this great American invention that started in the black community, continues to grow and change over time. Just like you. You're always growing and changing, right? You're not like you were when you were younger. So jazz keeps evolving. So we're going to finish with one final song. It's called Miles and Styles Ahead. We pay tribute to another great jazz trumpet player and composer, Miles Davis. And we also take a look at some other styles of music that grew out of jazz: bebop, rhythm and blues or R&B, rock and roll, fusion, and even hip hop. And be sure to pay attention to the great improvised solos from some of our members, and also listen to the different styles of music. Here they are, some of the 68 members of the Symphonic Jazz Orchestra. On drums, Mr. Clayton Cameron. On bass, Ms. NEDRA Wheeler. Piano, Mr. Christian Jacob. On saxophone was Ms. Ann Patterson. On violin, Mr. Chris Woods. Our trumpeter was Mr. James Ford. And on trombone, Mr. Francisco Torres. We hope you had a good time with us, sharing a little bit of jazz, a little bit about jazz history. We hope to see you soon at one of our upcoming free concerts at the Carpenter Performing Arts Center in Long Beach. You can learn more about our concerts and our Music in the Schools program. Just go to the website, www.sjomusic.org. We'll see you soon.